Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Seahawks fans, welcome back to another edition of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with Keith Myers. We're talking Seahawks football. Seahawks visit the Pittsburgh Steelers on Sunday night. Keith, welcome in. Let's talk some football here.
Yeah, good morning. So this is a morning recording for Bill and I. So we've got the coffee thing going today, and so
cheers.
Seahawks taking on the Steelers on their second primetime game in a row, and then second of three. There'll be three primetime games in a row because they come off this Sunday night tilt against the Steelers, and they play a Monday night the following week. So, what are we looking at here?
Well, we'll probably get to regress a little bit into this show, and we'll talk Seahawks and what's wrong and all that good stuff. And there's plenty of time to do that. But let's talk about the Steelers for just a little bit. They actually opened the season. They weren't supposed to be very good this year, right? Everyone kind of is like, this is a below 500 team. It's on the rebound. They're still limping along with Ben Roethlisberger, et cetera. Mike Tomlin's been there for life. And they started the season with a surprising win against Buffalo, 23-16. And then it's really kind of been downhill since. I mean, they had a win against the Broncos last week, 27-19, which kind of surprised some people because they look pretty decent on offense, which has been really pretty bad this year. And then their defense is still pretty good, but hasn't been as good as it has been in the previous 4 years. So like in the previous 4 years, the Steelers have had a top 5 defense. And Keith Butler, believe it or not, the old linebacker from the Seattle Seahawks, is still there as their defensive coordinator. He's been there as a defensive coordinator for 8 years, but I think he's been with the team since nearly like the year 2000, something like that.
He's been there forever.
And then this year they rank 16th overall on defense, which is respectable. But they're 9th against the run, and their pass defense is 19th. Mm-hmm. So there's a few favorability situations going on here with the Seahawks that I think we can expand on today and talk about that. Offensively, though, they bring the 27th ranked offense into this game. Although they looked good against the Broncos, it seems like that's probably an area where we might be able to get right this week.
Yeah, possibly. But at the same time, like this is. Well, we'll see what happens with Seattle's defense, because Seattle's defense is a mess. But we're not talking about the mess of Seattle's defense. We're trying to talk about the Steelers at the moment. They average only 6.6 yards per pass attempt.
I saw that.
Which, if your quarterback is averaging that, that's usually when you bench them for someone else. Because anything under about 7.2 is bad. It's just genuinely bad. And, just in contrast, Seattle is the best in the league at 9.3 yards per pass attempt.
Right.
And so,
to me, that's really favorable for the way that we spent a couple of shows this week talking about the ways in which Seattle could mitigate some of this crap that's going on with them. And one of those ways was to kind of get Jamal Adams closer to the line of scrimmage and let the defensive back end, at least that was my opinion, let the defensive back end kind of fend for themselves a little bit. And what that did then would be to expose them over the top a little bit. And maybe in this game, they go ahead and move Jamal Adams up a little bit to kind of defend the run. Najee Harris is there. And see if Ben Roethlisberger challenged Ben to throw deeper, and Juju Smith-Schuster is out, and I think this game is actually set up pretty decent for the Seahawks, but they've got to bring their deal. So
the thing is that if you're bringing Jamal Adams up to the line of scrimmage to stop the run, you're you don't have to do that. The Steelers aren't a good running team either.
They
I mean,
haven't been.
they're only averaging 3.6 yards per carry, which is the third worst in the league.
Yeah.
Right. So their running game compared to the rest of the league is worse than their passing game is compared to the rest of the league. And they're both just genuinely bad. So when you said it's the 27th ranked,
they're just as bad on offense as we are on defense.
they are, because they're bad at both. And when you put them both together on their just pure yards per play, without separating passing and receiving, they're like them and the Texans are 1-2.
And I think I read too where Ben Roethlisberger's only thrown 6 touchdowns so far this year. He's got 4 interceptions. Their turnover ratio is not really good. I know that Mike Tomlin and Keith Butler really do pride themselves on creating turnovers, and so that hasn't been a factor this year. They are a middling team. I mean, they are 2-3 for a reason, just like the Seahawks are. But which is the better 2-3 team?
If Russell Wilson was playing, the Seahawks would be by far the better 2-3 team, but he's not. And as bad as the Steelers' offense has been, the Seahawks' defense has a way of making every opposing quarterback look good. So Roethlisberger might be able to, shut down some of the he should retire mid-season talk simply because he's playing against Seattle. And so there's that, but and then it comes down to, we can look at the other side of the ball in a minute. What will Seattle be able to do with a Geno Smith-led team against this Steeler defense, which is not as good as last year, but it's still got some talent. They lost some pieces.
We seem to struggle against the Titans. We seem to struggle against the Rams a little bit in the second half. The first half was pretty decent. This is probably the second or third best defense we'll have faced so far in this short season so far. Are there any primary areas that you think that we can take advantage of them while Seattle's on offense?
Well, I do think that, they lost Bud Dupree in the offseason, and you can see it in their pass rush. It's just not quite the same, and that's part of the reason why their defense has dropped.
They do have TJ Watt, and he is a great player.
Oh, he's a fantastic player, and I'm not
he's only one guy.
But he's one guy, and so what teams have been doing is putting 2 or 3 guys on him to slow him down, and the other guys aren't.
Yeah, like Melvin Ingram, who's really old now and ineffective.
Well, I like Melvin.
I do too.
I did. He was a really underrated player for quite a while. But he's getting to the end of his ability to be a productive player, and so they just don't have the guys to take advantage of the fact that opposing offenses are keying on Watt, and it's leading to them to struggle to get to the quarterback, to struggle to get pressure. And with more time, opposing quarterbacks have been able to pick apart, the coverage. Now, can Geno Smith take advantage of that? Or we're going to find out, because he's a backup quarterback for a reason. I think he's a good backup quarterback.
Yeah,
one of the better backup quarterbacks in the league, but he's still a backup quarterback for a reason.
So how impressed were you about Geno Smith coming in that game last week and what he was able to do in just a short period of time? Take that tip ball interception away from him, and I really liked what he did. I felt the energy, I felt the confidence, I felt the preparedness of him being a pro, and those things gave me some hope, actually.
Well, I think he did. He came in. He was. I think better. I think I think the expectation from the Rams was that the Seahawks were going to try and run the ball a lot, and they went ahead and let him throw it. He executed the offense. He did those things, but he also, you can see the ball just doesn't have a zip as it does when Wilson's throwing it. It doesn't get out onto the receivers quite as quick, and he's not able to throw that deep ball and connect on those 60-yard touchdown passes to Lockett and Metcalf in the same way. So there are parts of the offense that are going to disappear with him there, but there are other parts of the offense, like his willingness to take what the offense is designed for and be okay with an 8-yard gain rather than going for a 28-yard, explosive play will add some efficiency to the offense. So we're going to lose that explosiveness, but gain perhaps a better third down efficiency. And
I'm actually okay with
that.
that as far as just kind of getting a baseline understanding and feel of the offense, the way that Shane Waldron kind of has it designed, and how effective that can actually be. Having Russell Wilson is awesome. I'm not going to take anything away from that. I can hardly wait until he comes back. My point is that the offense is diverse enough where I think it can handle 2 or 3 different style quarterbacks and give them different opportunities to kind of take advantage of some different things. Specifically, I think with Geno Smith, we're talking about tempo, being able to get the ball out quickly, making quick decisions. Geno Smith goes through his progressions pretty good, really. Like his first 3 progressions for a guy that's been in the league for a while, he's going to be able to do that. And so I still think, and you'd mentioned the willingness to kind of get that ball out fairly quick to a receiver that's created an initial separation in a route is something that Russell Wilson has a tendency not to want to do. He kind of wants to make sure he goes through all his progressions, and then he goes through progressions number 4, 5, and 6 as well as he's scrambling around. That's typical, and that's the way that we've seen him operate for a long time. We're kind of used to that, but now we're going to see something that's a lot more constructed, a lot more designed the way that it's actually designed, and see how that looks.
And there's been a lot of debate about should they reel Russell Wilson in and make him run the offense, or let him continue to search for those explosive plays. And there's stuff to be said about both approaches. But when you are in that dink and dunk approach, which is what it's going to kind of come down to, there's going to be a lot of 6-yard passes, 3-yard run, and try and convert on third down. It takes one mistake, one blown play, and your drive-ins. Whereas when you're going for explosives and everything is an attempt at a 15, 18-yard play or more, every play that's successful gives you a new set of downs. You don't need to string, right? It's like hitting the home run versus trying to string together a bunch of singles.
And this could be an issue because, Chris Carson continues to not practice because of a neck situation, which is disappointing. But that may impact the way that they have to kind of run this thing. Now, I think that Geno has a good enough arm where anything inside of 20 yards, I think he can make those throws.
Oh, he can.
Sideline to sideline, over the middle, on the go, screens. So I'm not worried about anything short, like in that way. Now, if you take a look at that way, I mentioned Jared Goff before. I don't like Jared Goff, but he has a very distinct situation in his NFL career, in the fact that he can't throw the ball past 20 yards. And so everything that you saw last year with in this offense as it's designed that Seattle has now, everything was underneath like that. And so to me, I think that's a way forward with Geno is to just kind of rein this in a little bit, operate the offense kind of the way it's designed, get the ball out quick, and give your receivers and your playmakers opportunities to make plays now, as opposed to Russell Wilson.
Yeah. And that is one of the things is you're going to be looking at looking for opportunities for more yards after the catch. You're going to see more, probably see more misdirection, more like jet sweep action, whether they hand it off or not.
Is Dwayne Eskridge back this week?
I just assumed he was.
I assumed he was either, but I think that comes out today, whether he's actually
because
ready to go.
He practiced. And so when you, in concussion protocol, when you practice, you have to make it through the practice, like a full practice, and then within the next 24 hours, not have any headaches or any, symptoms return after the exercise of a practice. And so he's practiced. We'll find out. And at this point, like I said, it's been a couple of weeks, 2.5 weeks since his concussion. I was just kind of assuming he was going to make it through protocol because he's practicing. But, if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen.
So let's talk about the Seahawks on the defensive side of the ball, Keith.
Wait, this is a Seahawk podcast, so I suppose we should talk about Seattle's defense. That's not necessarily a bad idea, is it?
So this is, to me, and we talked about it at the top of the show, is that this is an opportunity, I think, for the Seahawks to kind of get right, really reevaluate what they're doing on the defense, maybe get into just some of the basics of what they want to do on coverage, of how they want to approach the way they hand off those things in their zone coverages and so forth. I just need to see some improvement there, because it's just been blatantly bad, just really bad, especially, there's a zone there with the defense. And I'm not like Matty Brown. I'm not technical. I don't know all the technical terms that he readily brings up and diagnoses those things really well. But what I'm seeing is, wide receivers coming off the line of scrimmage, and they know Seattle is really crappy at this. So they'll go to a point where they know that transition happens, that whoever's got them initially is now handing them off to somebody else. And therein lies all of the problems, it seems to me. I just over and over and over and over again throughout the year, multiple different players, not just one player, have had problems with that area in the field. And I'm wondering what you see and what you think about that and how they can manage to fix that.
Well, part of it is a communication issue. You just don't see.
Why would a guy like Trey Flowers bitch and moan so much about that? It's seemingly that aspect of it, where he's talking about the communication aspect of it, where he is one of the guys responsible for communicating. So it seems like he would want to have that.
As the cornerback, he is the guy often that it's being handed off to, not that he's handing it off to someone else. And so, the routes develop as they develop. The defense doesn't get to say, which way the routes go. And so he needs communication from the linebackers, from the safeties.
Why are we not seeing this same problem from any other team?
Why are we seeing the same problem 2 years in a row when we didn't really see the same problem under this Pete Carroll scheme in the past?
Right.
I don't have an answer. I don't have an answer for that.
And the same guy that I can't remember his name, the same coach, the defensive backs coach, has been here for a while. This isn't just his first rodeo, right? I can't remember his name. And Deshaun Shedd has come back too, a guy that's played in this defense, a guy that knows how it's supposed to work, a guy that was around Andre Curtis, the guy that was around the Legion of Boom. He knows how this thing is supposed to function at a very high level, and it still hasn't had any effect this year. So I'm just curious, because
I think that
everyone's searching for these answers, but nobody really has a clear understanding of what's going on, and nobody from the Seahawks organization seems to be willing to share any details as to what's happening. Pete is just like, we're working on it. It's awesome. We're just real close. It's a week away. We're doing everything we can. Blah, 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 blah.
He's being Pete Carroll. I mean, that's what Pete Carroll does and says, and he stands by his guys. And a year ago, we were looking at this and we're like, God, this defense is terrible. And he was telling us that. He was like, we're close. We're getting there. He's like, it's the switch is about to flip, and the defense, we'll get this figured out. And to his credit, it did. Right. Some of it was people getting back healthy, and some of it was just guys finally buying in and doing what was necessary.
What do you think about Bobby Wagner's comments yesterday, I believe, in a press conference, where he said, "Hey, listen, Russell Wilson's out. We have the full confidence in Geno Smith, but it's our time. Like, this defense needs to step up and carry this team."
That is Bobby Wagner being a leader, and I think it's where he's right. It's time. Like, you can do whatever, but you've got it. At some point, you just got to do it, right? You can You can talk about it. You can learn. We say, hey, we're learning, we're working on it, we're getting better, blah, blah, blah. But at some point, it has to work. And now's the time it's got to work. And I think what you end up with, and Trey Flowers got released, right? He says he asked for his release. The team was like, not really. We were just done. It was time to move on. I think this is one of those rare occasions where a mutual parting of ways is actually true, and not just somebody getting fired, because he had played poorly, got benched, made some comments that weren't helpful, in that he was basically blaming the scheme, which he wasn't wrong, because there were scheme issues that were causing problems, but also he wasn't doing his job within the scheme. So he was creating some of the scheme issues that were causing problems. So it was just time. It was time for him to move on, and for the team to look at other guys, because if he's not gonna get it done, somebody will. Right now it's Sidney Jones, and if it's not Sidney Jones, it's going to be Ryan Neal, or maybe Trey Brown gets an opportunity. Maybe Ugo Amadi moves outside, and Trey Brown becomes the inside guy. We'll see. But as a what you were talking about with that spot where they're like handing off coverage, this isn't any different than they did during the Legion of Boom days. Now, there were times when that communication would break down, and you saw a lot of these like deep switch routes where two guys would both go deep. One would carry the center, and the other would wheel to the outside, and the guy carrying into the center would pull the cornerback, and it would leave that big play. And teams would go to it on occasion when they needed a big play, because it was a cover 3 beater. And it took some work for the team to figure out how to deal with that particular route concept and not get beat by it, once or twice a game. But they did, right? So we know that there are some things, but what you're looking at in what's going on this year, it isn't that. It isn't just like this nice route concept that happens to attack the cover 3 in just the right way. It's just guys not doing their job. They're either not communicating, or they're letting.
It's really interesting though that 4 or 5 guys would not be doing their job. Like one here, one there, just kind of. But man, these are guys who are top of their profession that study all day on watching film and then walkthroughs, and they hold each other accountable, and etc. And it's so defined, this having be prevalent throughout an organization points to something higher to me.
And I would absolutely agree with that. And so I think when you look at it, when you have a defense that isn't working, guys start trying to do too much. And when they start doing too much, they get themselves out of position, because they're trying to do other people's jobs as well as their own. And so they get, and then it does worse. And then other people start doing the same thing, because you just try and do too much. And at some point, everyone has to just relax, go back, do your job, do it really well, and trust the other teammates. And I think that lack of trust is happening.
That's what the meeting was last year.
Yes. And that's what the meeting was last year, was that there was simply just a lack of trust between guys, because no one was believing that anyone else was going to do their job. So everyone was trying to do 3 people's jobs, which meant that no one was doing their own. And that's why the defense was historically bad. And it looks
now,
like
is there anybody in this defense that you could readily identify as a player that for a fact is the epicenter of the problem, and then everyone else is trying to compensate for that particular player? Are we talking about Brooks, for example?
No, we're not. When we're looking at when I'm watching the All-22, I'm seeing there's some confusion in certain guys where they're not sure what they should be doing. Part of
we went into this season with like 10 or 12 cornerbacks heading into training camp, and 3 of those guys remain on the team.
Yeah.
Could that be an issue?
It is, but that's because the 12 cornerbacks it required 2 that actually had there were 3 that had talent, and one of them got traded to Pittsburgh at the end of training camp. So you've got that is a problem. So there you have guys that are learning, but it's not just the cornerbacks. You see Daryl Taylor and Alton Robinson, who are trying their best to play strong side linebacker when they've their entire like collegiate career until they got to the pros. And even for Robinson last year as a rookie, they were a defensive end. And now they're being asked to drop back and play that outside linebacker spot.
And those guys are plenty athletic enough. But
true, but
when they play in the box,
there's a certain level of instinct that they haven't developed yet because it's a completely new position for them. And when you're asking those guys to drop back into coverage because of the way that, I mean, you want them coming forward, you don't want them dropping back. But if the defense, sends someone in motion and has a flood concept to that side, you need that person to drop back and cover a zone. It's the only way you're gonna have coverage in that area. And these are guys that they're not comfortable in that yet. They're essentially kind of playing out of position.
They're having to think. They're having to think a lot in this defense right now.
And so that's part of it. I mean, and I don't want to blame them because they're being put in a situation that's a little awkward for them, and they're doing their best to do it.
It does seem to me that this points a lot to a couple of specific position groups, linebacker and safety. And maybe we can add defensive ends in there only because I think we're asking them to do some things that, you shouldn't see Robinson backpedaling down the field 35 yards down the field covering a tight end on a seam route. You shouldn't. You shouldn't
see that. And what it comes down to, I mean, that's a play call problem where you have guys in there expecting the opposing team to do certain things and they don't do that. And well, that's the guy playing that position. It's his job. He's doing his best to try and do it. That's a play call problem. And so you don't want to have that. I admire the players for doing their best, but that's not, they're playing out of position and they're really trying. Right. I mean, Bobby Wagner is absolutely an amazing player, but you line him up as a cornerback and he's going to struggle, right? You put him in at defensive tackle and, he'll probably still have 100 tackles in a season, but the run defense isn't going to be as good. And so that's kind of what's going on there. So that's a play call problem. And then they're in their attempt to get their best 11 guys on the field, they're taking these 2 defensive ends and having them play strong side linebacker and rotate in that. And those 2 guys are playing out of position. So when they don't have the right play call in there, you're exposing them. And this is a situation where you have, okay, well, the other players on the field know what's going on. And so you see that you see a play going through and that you're asking this pass rusher to drop 30 yards in downfield into coverage. Okay, so now now Diggs is moving in that direction to try and help because these guys are just being exposed for having a different sort of athleticism. But if he's moving in that direction, that's leaving a cornerback on the opposite side exposed and not having the safety help that they're expecting. So they're positioning as they go down the field, right? If you're expecting to have safety help on the inside, right, you may be in a trail position where you're wanting to make sure that the ball doesn't get outside. You're letting your positioning in coverage is expecting that the safety is going to come over and take out that inside passing lane. And if the safety's out of position because he's trying to cover for someone else, well, now your positioning, which you're doing based on the play that's called and everything that's going on, your positioning might be correct, but now the pass is complete because your positioning is based on the help that didn't come.
So it seems like the whole thing compounds on itself. It's not just one isolated situation. It's just the full field. When you're this bad, when you're giving up 305 passing yards a game, and it was worse last year, but nonetheless, it's happening everywhere. It is uniformly. It's not just one guy, one spot.
And that's the problem. And that's why last year they had to have that accountability meeting where everyone was like, no, look, you do your job. you don't do other people's jobs. And it worked itself out. And I think that was also why we saw such an improvement in the quality of the play when Ryan Neal specifically got a bunch of playing time, because he was a guy who hadn't been out there watching other guys struggle around him. And so he came in as a guy that did his job specifically and didn't try and do other people's jobs. And it just helped because other people have started to have confidence on, okay, I can trust he's going to be in position. So I can be in my position. And you need more guys, right? Because Diggs is doing his best in the back end to cover for everybody. That's his job as a free safety. But if he knows that Ryan Neal will be in position every time, then that gives him some freedom, right? And so what Diggs needs is to know and have confidence that, whether it be Ryan Neal, whether it be Ugo Amadi, whether it be Bobby Wagner or Jordan Brooks, there's a bunch of different guys that he needs to be able to trust that are going to be in position and doing their job on every play, so that he's not trying to survey and figure out, okay, who do I have to cover for? He can just react, because that's his job.
Apologies to everybody. I'm going to go a little long today on this show because I want to get into something that I think has just had a free pass up till this point. And I want to talk about it because I think it really affects everything on the defensive side. And that's the rush defense. This team right now is giving up 145 yards a game against the run.
They did so well in week 1 against the Colts of shutting down Taylor against a really good offensive line,
which is proven to be less than at this point now. But
so far this season, okay, this was a good offensive line a year ago, and it's the same, a lot of the same players,
right.
And a really good running back, and they shut that running game down. And then in week 2, they got ran over by Derrick Henry, and it's just been a problem since.
And so, my question is, what's worse, having one of the, Pete Carroll's a pillar guy. One of the pillars of his defensive schemes is defending the run.
Yeah.
And when you can't do that, a lot of other things break down, including pass coverage eventually.
It's stop the run, force them into 3rd and long. Don't let anything over the top, because if it's 3rd and
eliminate
long,
the big plays, explosive plays in the run game as well.
Well, yeah, which we've just
not been good.
Stop the run entirely, and then don't allow the big play over the top of the offense, because you set them up 3rd and 8. Let them complete it underneath. Let them complete the 5-yard pass. Come up, make the tackle, get off the field. I mean, that's how this defense was built. And when this was the best defense in the league, they did that extremely well. And this year, they're not doing any of those things.
Yeah. So this was one of my concerns heading into the year, was our ability to defend the run. I knew that the back end was going to be an issue. I didn't know how big or whatever, but I knew that stopping the run was going to be an issue because we got rid of Jerron Reed in the offseason. We brought in Al Woods, and good for Al. He didn't play, though, last year. He's had a great year, though, so far. Poona Ford is Poona Ford. He's a little undersized, but, man, effort-wise, the guy's he's still a top 15 defensive tackle in the NFL.
He is.
However, with that said, that's not enough. It's not enough because teams are going around those guys. And frankly, after a while, they're getting beaten down as well, because there are only guys that, Monet's in there as well. But
they only have 3.
We're getting gashed.
Tackles.
We're getting gashed in the middle too. So, and then the defensive ends don't seem to be setting the edge. And then when they're being asked to do some other things or stunt, I've even seen a guy like Jamal Adams try to come up and play quote unquote linebacker, on occasion, and just getting completely swallowed on the edge and just getting run over essentially.
Well, that's not his skill set.
It is not his skill set.
He's not a 250
Which points again
guy.
to some scheme issues where we've got guys out of position, which is, I think, the overarching problem.
So
And so I'm wondering if we have the
I didn't
personnel.
share your I didn't share your pessimism on the run defense when I looked at this, because I was worried that they only had 3 defensive tackles, but all 3 of them are good against the run. Kerry Hyder is a good run defender as a defensive
Jamal
end.
Taylor's a beast.
Jamal Taylor has been good.
Not Jamal Taylor. Taylor. Is it not Jamal Taylor?
Daryl Taylor.
Daryl Taylor, sorry.
Jamal Adams, Daryl Taylor.
Yeah, right.
Jamal Taylor. So that's when you merge the 2 players. And
Daryl Taylor's a good run
Taylor.
defender, a good edge setter, and so forth. We had Collier, we had AJ, Rasheem Green. You're right. On paper, it seems like those guys should be able to do enough. Not 145 yards yielded per game. No,
that's more
like 100 yards per game unit. On paper,
this should be a significantly better run stuffing unit than it is. The talent is there to do it,
which again points me to a huge situation in coaching. So if you not only have a coaching situation where you're not defending the run correctly, and on the back end you're wide open on your pass defense, my goodness, Keith, come on. I mean,
so when I look at all of this, and we were talking about guys not doing their job and trying to do too much in the pass defense, it's happening in the run defense too. Because in pass defense, we were talking about zones and handing stuff off and all of that. In the run defense, it's about lane integrity. And, each of the defensive linemen and the outside linebacker, the strong side linebacker, each have a gap that they attack. And then the linebackers and the strong safety, Jamal Adams, each have a responsibility as well. And so when you go back to the big 64-yard run or whatever it was by Henry in week 2, and what you saw there was Jamal Adams diving inside, trying to make a big play, and leaving his responsibility, which was this cutback lane, completely unattended. And so when Henry gets the ball, he has good vision. He saw Adams slashing across in front of him, and he just put his foot in the ground and did a cutback right out through that hole that was left. And he was off to the races. Now, you also have Flowers over there, but he's got a different responsibility. He's got the outside edge. And so he could have come in and tried to make that play, but he was trying to do his job, expecting that Adams is going to do his own.
So hold on. So I gotta stop you really quick, because you said Flowers.
Yeah.
So you're talking about the corner coming up.
The corner, because he
on the edge. I just wanted to make sure, because
it was. So he was. It's all backside. So you've got 2 backside defenders. You've got Adams, who's supposed to come up in that, because they had a tight end on the backside, and he's supposed to cover in that one gap, and then Flowers has the outside.
So,
he has the edge,
and he's the last guy.
And he's the last guy
other
on the
than
outside.
Your deep safeties.
And so when Adams went inside, now you've got a huge gap between the defensive end, who's all the way in by the guard, and Flowers, whose job is to protect the outside, way outside.
And he's
corner.
one juke away from
and
nothing.
So and not only
empty field.
And that's exactly what happened. So when Henry makes that cut and cuts outside, he's got a freeway. I could probably have run, for 10 yards on that play, because there's no there just aren't any defenders. And it's because guys were getting themselves out of position, and we're seeing that routinely. We're seeing guys attack the wrong gap. Quite often you're seeing a lot of that kind of stuff. Brooks has been victim of it. Jamal Adams has been a victim of it. You see, you don't see Bobby Wagner doing it, but you see Taylor and Robinson. Cody Barton has been really bad about it, because he wants to flow. He's used to, you can tell
he wants to flow, and then he gets swallowed on the backside.
Yep. He wants to flow into the attack, and then he leaves that spot. And it's not working. So we have guys in both the run defense and the pass defense that aren't doing their job. They're trying to do other people's job.
We have a team discipline problem.
Absolutely.
And that's on one or two people. That's on Pete Carroll and that's on
Ken Norton
Jr. And is it a respect issue?
I
So that's
I
the
don't think
larger question,
I don't
Keith,
think it
right? Is
is.
it,
I think it's
has the team already lost confidence
no.
in the coaches?
I don't believe it is.
And is this what happens as a result?
I think this is it's not working and guys are simply trying to do too much. And they need to take a step back and trust their teammates. If everybody trusts each other and you do your job and you trust that your teammates are going to do theirs, this defense works really well. And right now, there isn't that trust. I don't think it has anything to do with the scheme, or I mean, it did with Flowers, but that's also why he's gone. But I think everyone else, it comes down to when things stop working, people try and do too much, and then that makes it worse, not better.
So when you're out of the gate and people are trying to do too much, because you haven't had a chance to have it not work yet, it doesn't work from the beginning.
That's a teaching problem.
Yeah,
that's a teaching problem. That's either it not being communicated from Norton to the position coaches, or it's not being communicated from the position coaches to the players. And so there are two different points of failure there, and it's happening at one or the other.
Does this come back to a situation where it's virtual in the off season and they didn't, and the OTAs didn't happen really, and you have less practice contact wise, and you're depending on virtual learning? And
I'm tempted to say yes, but then I look around the league. Is it happening anywhere else?
Mm-hmm. And and they said that they did a very good job, not only this year but last year. And that Pete was very praiseworthy of making sure that he said that everything went as best as completely possible. And then they had the worst defense last year for the first 5 or 6 games, and now it's happening again. So there's this disconnect there.
Maybe it's a problem there, but other teams also did the virtual thing and they're not having this problem. So I don't want to just say, oh, well, it's because it had to be virtual. This is a COVID problem. Yeah. Other teams aren't having the same outcome.
I would just say, as we're kind of winding this down, is that you and I have been following the team for a long time, and we know talent pretty well. We're pretty good at kind of evaluating the roster and being honest with that and not being homeristic and all that kind of stuff. We both kind of understand that the roster is constructed in a way that's pretty decent. We had a pretty decent roster. We had a roster that was going to give us a chance to get anywhere from 11 to 13 wins. That's where this team is talent wise.
Yep.
And then you have it.
They have one glaring weakness on this entire roster.
Right.
That's cornerback. But you've got you've got 74 pass rushers set up to help account for that. And it's not working. It really isn't working. That the talent
so it's just not a talent. It's not a talent deal. It's really not. And even on the defensive backs, quite frankly, there's talented guys there. There's guys that can do the job in the NFL. They're in the NFL. It's a pretty exclusive club. We'll see. So getting back to Pittsburgh, we'll sign off.
Okay.
This is a situation. I would feel a little bit more comfortable if it was at home, but it is on the road. It's Sunday Night Football, prime time. The team has good leadership. I think Jamal Adams is undervalued in that way. He might be out of position a few different times and so forth, but I think that he does have some special ability and just needs kind of an opportunity here to let that happen. Bobby Wagner's there. They've got some great leadership abilities all across the defense and the offense. So I think things will come together. This is a good team to kind of get right on. A bad offense going against a bad defense that's trying everything they can to improve. Let's see if it can happen this week. One of these times, I think it's going to be a switch, and it just kind of happens.
With Russell Wilson getting hurt, I was thinking about this since our last show, and not just because the one YouTuber called me Debbie Downer.
This is the show where I tried to convince you that we had a shot at going at like 3-2 in the next 5.
And I was trying to being more of a realist, which apparently meant that I was being the ultimate pessimist, according to some people. But I have been thinking a lot about all of this, and one thing that I think I missed before that show and looking at this is the part that you were just talking about, is Russell Wilson getting hurt and then Bobby Wagner coming out and being like, no, it's on us. We have to be better. We have to make this work. This can be that rallying cry that all of a sudden gets everyone on the same page. All of a sudden, just everything gets better because it has to. And no more like just waiting for Russell Wilson to bail them out. He's not there. So now he's hurt. And maybe this is the point where that happens. And then Wilson comes back and they don't lose that. They just gain the explosiveness back in the offense, and suddenly this team goes on a run. So there is that idea. I want to see it happen. I'm not going to count on it happening until I see it, but that possibility is uniquely there, and it should be mentioned.
Interesting. So I sent you, we traded texts, I think on Sunday, Saturday, something like that. And we started talking about what we were going to do this week for shows. And we had talked about the idea of me trying to convince you that we're going to be okay.
Wasn't over.
Yeah. And you said that there's just no way you're just not going to be able to do it. And I said, you'll come around. I now point to this. Just a hint. Now, just a window.
Just a little hint.
Just a window of optimism.
I'll believe it when I see it. But I will admit that this could be the thing that sets it off.
I hope it is actually.
I'd love to see it because the talent's there. This team needs to come together and really.
It's too early to give up on this team. Is basically, I think, the overarching idea.
The talent's there. It really is. And if they can just pull it together, they go 3-2 during these next 5 games, sit at 500, at 5-5, with 7 games to go. They could get, they can
go on a run is what they would have to do.
Yeah, go 5-2 down the stretch, get to 10 wins, get into the playoffs, and a good team that's hot down the stretch in the playoffs is a dangerous team. I mean, that's what the Bucs were last year. They were
that's
pretty,
right. That's exactly right. Yeah, they were 9-7, weren't they, or 10 and
they were. I think they ended up 10-6, but they were
10-6 team to go on and win a Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, and they weren't great. They looked pretty like maybe they'd get into the playoffs for most of the season, and then it kind of came together. And got they started to get this. It started to work, and they really kind of went on that run. And once they got there, they took advantage of it. And I mean, we always say, oh, you have to have home field and all of that. You don't. Go just look at it. Don't look at Seattle's history because they've only made it when they were the first number 1 overall seed. But go look at the Super Bowl teams. There's a lot of times when wildcard teams end up making it because they just got hot at the right time. They got a couple breaks here and there.
And like you said, you're gonna have to see it, because the defense has a long way to go. I mean, really, they do. They're not even in that conversation right now. And in order for that conversation to even be had, they need to show up for like 2 or 3 games in a row, and we're going to be like, okay, now maybe, right? But until that happens, so we'll see. And this is the game that they have a chance to kind of.
They have a chance to start it because you have a bad offense with the Steelers, and in a couple of weeks you've got the Jaguars coming to town. You should be able to get those 2 wins, even with Geno at cornerback, as the defense is trying to find its way. You should go into the bye week at 3-3 at the worst, and if you can't, then you have additional problems to work out.
All right. Thanks for joining us, everybody. It was great to talk Seahawks football and preview this game a little bit and try to figure out, again, what's going on with the team. It seems like that's going to be a prevailing theme for a few shows now and again for the next few weeks. Follow Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL and at NW Seahawk. The show is at Hawks Playbook. Seahawks Playbook.com has all of the shows. That's our website. So check that out. Follow us on your favorite podcast app and subscribe on YouTube. So until next time,
Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Phil is at NW Seahawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.